Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Kelly Williams. Welcome to the show, Kelly. Looking forward to chatting further with you today and discussing healing, right? Digging right into this healing stuff.
Yeah. Happy to be here. Hopefully I can, there's some nuggets that I can throw out there that'll help somebody else.
Brilliant. That's exactly what we're trying to do. Is we're trying to hold those nuggets up to the light and kind of point at those, point at those as best you can on something that is, about an audio rather than a visual media, and see if those nuggets, those hard-won nuggets that you've come across, whether they help other people. So as we were, before we connected on Facebook, I spotted this funny thing that we've actually born the same year. So there seems to be a lot of people come on the show around the same age as us, and maybe we're at a similar kind of stage in our life. So what does healing mean to you, Kelly?
It depends on it. It depends on my mindset at the time, to be honest with you. Because there's physical healing, which I've come to learn that trauma actually can change the human, change your biochemistry. So yeah, the idea that the human body is just what it is without responding to external stimuli is like, nah, that doesn't work. Then there's the emotional level, which also impacts your physical level. Then there's mental, which, because let's face it, a lot of times our emotional responses are to how we think about things, and then you also have the whole spiritual, so depending on what's going on, it's, shall I say, a multi-lens thing. So I try the best I'm able to approach it from a holistic method, holistic level of trying to look at the whole picture instead of just focusing solely on the emotional, solely on the mental, solely on spiritual, solely physical, because we don't live like that. I think that's been one of the great detriments, is the reductionist ideas that's got handed to us from quote unquote science. Because we're not machines. We're not. We've got, we're not talking about Newtonian mechanics and being able to predict, planetary motion or anything like that. So, for me, healing is me actually working towards a better state in all levels going forward. And this is just a personal belief of mine, because we have this force. Every living thing has this force that knows how to put stuff back together. As an analogy, you break your leg. Do you have to think about knitting that bone back together, do you have to think about what cells need to be activated and in what sequence and all that for healing to happen, for that bone to mend? You don't. So my personal belief is the same force, you can call it spiritual if you wish, that actually formed us, guided our growth, is still there, and it knows what health is. It knows what each individual being, call it optimum. And so I've settled into that. I've settled into that idea that as long as I do the work, there is, that force, call it spirit, call it the universe, call it whatever, Gaia, it's actually wants us to be in as healthy as possible for as long as possible. Because, I don't think we're here by accident. I don't believe that. I think there is call it something, call whatever you wish, that is guiding and also trying to help as best as possible, but we end up getting in our own damn way. So and this may be kind of reductionist after saying all that, but if something hurts mentally, physically, emotionally, that means that I'm not in health. And so I need to take a look at that, and I need to see where I'm getting in my own way.
Yeah.
Because you also got to think about programming. How did we learn to be human? How did we learn about, the society? How did we learn how to behave? Then you got to start thinking about the assumptions behind that programming. And, because let's face it, back when I was adopted, a single mother was like, ooh, no, you don't, no. And now, yeah, single motherhood's, may not be celebrated in all areas, but it's kind of the idea that it will be at least more beneficial for the child than, being placed somewhere with strangers. So kind of a long way around to describe what healing is to me.
Do any particular healing moments come to mind, Kelly?
Oh, there's been so many. So many. Let's see, my adoptive dad, and I remember this clearly. When it finally got through the separation trauma, that here's this person, not related to me, because as a child, you think like a child. Um, that actually loved me, accepted me just for the being that I was. Um, no reservations, no holdbacks, no. He loved me. Period. No questions. Um, and when that happened, he became my person. He was my person. Because as a boy, your father's usually a hero, right? Or the father figure. And he was more than that. He was more than dad. He was more than a hero. He was my friend. He was everything all wrapped up into one. And that's, is like, holy spit is, so there was that. There was the school teacher.
Sorry, can I just take you back to that one?
Sure.
Yeah. So you said when the attachment trauma ended, you saw this. Is that would that be is that what you were saying?
Oh, okay. Multiple things going on all at the same time, just like life. So, yeah, I was still dealing with the trauma, being separate, because pre-verbal, how does pre-verbal, you can't adequately express these emotions in words, right? So that was still there, but it was mitigated by my bond to my adoptive dad. And to be honest with you, that saved my life. It really did.
When did you first kind of feel that?
Oh, shoot. The first memory that I have of that, I was probably 3 years old, somewhere in there. And I had, I'd been on a crying jag because of, just the pain, right? Being separated from mom. And he didn't tell me how to feel. He didn't, basically he gave me validation. It's like, and, he's like, I don't know why you're crying, but obviously if it's hurting that bad that you got to cry, that's fine. Go ahead, cry it out. And then after I got to that stage, where I'm done crying, but my breath is still ragged. He goes, let's go ride a motorcycle. And so go out, he fired up a motorcycle. He's standing astride it. He leans over, grabs me, throws me on the front, and in front of him, and away we go. And he was a non-verbal way of showing me that he accepted me, that he cared, that he was concerned about me. And that's when it was like, okay, in my child head, the whole yeah, I've got all these feelings and stuff like that, but at least here's an adult. Here's somebody that I can count on. And I mean, there was solace there, you know. He was my refuge. So I could be having an emotional thing. I could be mad. I could be sad. I could be whatever it was. And just being around him gave me a sense of peace, gave me a sense that it'll be okay, you know, and just keep breathing and just ride it out. So that was to memory, that was one of the biggest times that I could, you know, and then he was consistent too. There was no variation. It wasn't one of those things where, oh, he had a bad day and so he didn't want to deal with me, or he was my rock, man.
Yeah.
And I still miss the old guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I lost him. It was a traffic accident the year I turned 14.
Oh, wow.
Which is a long time ago now.
Yeah.
But yeah, that rock that he is, I still rely on it to this day, you know. And so I know some crib mates don't have that, but I think the universe will put people in your path that will be that consistent, you know, person. But I think sometimes we get so wrapped up in our own crap that we don't see it, you know, or we only see it in retrospect.
Yeah. So did you, it's an amazing memory, and it must be an amazing dad. It's goosebumps for me. So what the hell's going on for you at the moment? I don't know. Is were you aware at 3 that you were adopted? Were you kind of consciously aware of it?
No, that happened about 4. I was one of those curious kids that always liked to dig into stuff and find stuff out and all that. So I was 4, already reading, way advanced of my age, and I was going through this storage area they had in the house, and just going through papers, all that kind of good stuff. And here's the paperwork for my adoption. And that's kind of how I found out, you know, consciously. Subconsciously, there was always that kind of not fitting, you know, where, because, you know, with families, typically you'll have, especially among the kids, you will have like a shared laugh or shared interests or something, you know. But that really wasn't there, you know. So consciously, yeah, it was, like I said, it was 4 years old, found the paperwork, then I got the quote story. I swear the lies that were abounded in society at the time. That's why I wish we if I had a time machine, it'd just be nice to go back and start slapping people. I mean, seriously. It's like, how dare you? um, but it is, it was what it was. And it's only now in retrospect that I can see how, call it the universe, what put me in a position that gave me the best shot at actually turning into a decent human than if I would have stayed, if I would have stayed with my first mother, because again, retrospective, yeah, she didn't come from a very good background as far as family dynamics. And I mean, I've had my fair share of battles with addiction, primarily alcohol. And that, genetically, it seemed like both sides of my genetic code have got that weakness. And yeah, it's like chasing that, just trying to put the pieces together, trying to get that mosaic of what the who that I am, or at least where I came from. And there's strengths there, but there's also the weaknesses, just like everything.
Yeah.
Everything's a double-edged sword, at least in this realm.
Yeah.
Can
I take you back to you were about to share a kind of another healing moment?
Yeah.
Can I take you back to that? What was
sure.
what was the other moment that was coming to mind as?
Well, going through public education in the U.S., again, retrospectively, there was a teacher that just somehow or another would get me. And there was some kind of a connection. There was some kind of a understanding. Because as a kid, having an adult, having someone in authority believe in you and at least present that they have no doubts about your abilities, about your skills. That's life affirming. That is such an affirmation to actually start in the mind, to start thinking like, well, wait a minute. I'm thinking this, I'm feeling this type of way, usually not good. But then here's this person in authority, a quote unquote expert, if you will, that is showing me differently. So am I like, what am I missing? And that, through, I guess it would be through primary school. We call it elementary. And don't get me wrong, there were years that the teacher was not good, but then there were years that the teacher would just got me and actually would push to go, no, you can do better. You can do better at this. You can do better at that. And even to this day, being in my late 50s, I still remember every single name of every teacher that I had that did that. You know, and so over the 12 years I was in public education, there was a good eight teachers out of that out of those 12 years that they just somehow or another, again, going back to the universe, going back to spirit, encouraged me, pushed me, and it just accepted me as I was, that hell of a mess of a kid, but still saw the good, still saw the potential, still saw the being worthy of their time, their attention, their concern, and dare I say, love.
I had a funny feeling you were going to say love there.
Yeah. Well, that's, I mean, my definition of love has undergone so many different modifications, refinings over the years. But yeah, I can look back now and go, my high school English prep English teacher, phenomenal. She loved me. And there was a connection there. And I didn't really realize it at the time, you know, being a messed up kid, you know, still trying to figure out, it's like, okay, where in the hell did my ears come from? You know, where is my, where, you know, where does my viewpoint on this blah, 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 you know, where did my physical capabilities come from, you know, just that wondering of being unmoored, you know, being adrift and not really having anything that the genetic connection, the family history to tie you into the chain of humanity, the, you know, going back in time. It wasn't there, you know. But even despite all that, there were still people at certain places, certain times that gave a damn. Even when I wanted to be Mr. Spock from Star Trek, you know, logical, being able to push all the emotions, you know, still feel them, but push them aside, control them, lock them down. But to still have that connection to another human in a position of authority to give you that message that you are valuable, you are wanted, we care, I care. It was just, you want to talk about a gift, an absolute gift. And looking back through my life, there's been the times that I was just where I needed an adult. I needed an other to step into the breach, so to say, to kind of fulfill those roles, that role of being the encourager, being the, you can do better. Come on. I know your skills. I know your abilities. Come on, you can do better. And still be able to, for lack of a better term, love you in the mess that you're in at that time. It's just phenomenal. For me personally, it's just absolutely phenomenal. And I just lost what I'm going to say next.
So you clearly a deep thinker and a deep feeler. You talked about that sort of the questioning thing, like a deep thinker and a deep questioner. You talked about when there was a disparity between what you were thinking and what your teacher was thinking.
Yeah.
And you were kind of like in the moment being wise enough to say, what am I missing here? So, how I understood that is, where has my teacher got it right, and where am I seeing this wrong?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there's that turnaround, that turnaround piece, right? So there's there's going to be a turnaround in your perspective. You kind of like, okay, so what am I missing here? Is what you said. What would you say have been the biggest things that you've noticed as present on the back of that self-inquiry?
The biggest thing that I've noticed at present, wow.
Or what's the biggest shift in your perspective? What have been the biggest shifts in your perspective? What shifts of perceptive? What shifts of perspective come to mind when you think about how your perspective has changed?
How my perspective has changed. Let's see. Over the years, oh mercy. My perspective over the years have changed. In that maybe it comes from the idea of, like, you and I can see the same instance. Say a person with a wheelbarrow that's loaded full of pumpkins going down the sidewalk. Well, we're going to attach different emotional contexts to that same event. And it's not like that your context is, wrong or my context is wrong. It's there's an event and each person has their own process to attach meaning to that event. And because the meaning of the event is, that's where, at least in my experience, that's when you start, that's where it can either be beneficial or a negative. As an example, and it's taken me a while to get to this perspective. My mother, she came from basically a family with some really not good, really not good behavior patterns. And as kids absorb behavior patterns from their parents. It just absorbs into them, right? Because that's the way of humans, just as a species. Because a kid is learning how to be a human from other humans, and typically that's mother and father and siblings. And and I just lost it. You'll have to give me a moment. I know it's there. I'll find it. So and a child basically has to learn how to be human. And so it's that whole the dynamic among, parents to kids, and then not only between parents and kids, but also the wider society. And a lot of that programming, I'll use that term, just gets embedded, and kids start thinking that a certain way of being is just, that's the way it is. And I guess I've been fortunate enough to realize that I was made aware of that fairly early on. And just to try to figure out how, how you respond, how you cognitate, to use that term, on a particular level. Because as an adoptee, there's a lot of crap you got to navigate, man. You have that maternal loss that you have to deal with, that a lot of times is pre-verbal, and it's like, how do you express that? How do you quote heal from that? I don't know if you ever do really heal, but at least you can get to a point where your daily life can have enjoyment. You can look forward to the future. So but yeah, I've always been one of those people that have always been interested in, like, what is reality? I remember this clearly back when I was like 4 years old. What is reality? How is my reality the same as your reality? Okay. Well, if your reality is different than my reality, then what's really reality? And then, so I've always had a kind of an abiding interest in that. Um, and so, you know, and that also leads to, what really is reality. Is reality is whatever mechanism that's inside of us that assigns meaning to events. um that's part of who we are as humans, right? We attach meaning, we attach emotional meaning to events.
Yeah.
So, but who's to say that the emotional meaning that you placed on that event was the correct emotional meaning? Who's the arbitrator of that? Is there an external, is there some sort of external thing that you can point to go, hey, this is what and I guess part of that comes from the dynamics in my adoptive family, because like my adoptive father, he accepted me point blank, warts and all, didn't care. He staked his claim. I was his kid. He didn't give a damn. And he would fight anybody to the death that said anything different.
Yeah.
My adoptive mother, on the other hand, there is some weirdness there. So knowing that we assign meaning to events based off of our expectations, our emotional state at the time, our definition of reality is individual. And so what, as you can tell, I've spent a lot of thought on this. So, but it's the emotions that you have during an event or in you're recalling a memory that actually gives meaning to life. It gives meaning to our existence. But depending on your emotional state at the time, depending on how, typical thing, like you're happy, everything's good, you're driving somewhere and some jerk cuts you off. Well, in that moment, because you're happy, no big deal. But then you can be in an absolutely foul mood, and then somebody cuts you off, and then suddenly that triggers this whole emotional reaction. And it's like, so it's just the emotional sides, and I'm not saying that emotions are unimportant. They are very important. But a lot of times the emotional context doesn't match the events, because let me see if I can explain. Your emotional state will frame events in a particular context, even though they could be exactly the same. And emotions are for lack of a better term, they're kind of a guide, actually. I think the universe, the evolution, if you wish, or whatever, it gave us a emotional like GPS, for lack of a better term. And we as humans have the choice to see events in either a positive light or a negative light. And which then, depending on your viewpoint, will drive your emotional context, which then feeds into your memories and all that. And so I can tell you this much, that where I'm at right now, I can look back, examine memories that I've had from when I was 4 or 5 with the loss, because a kid is looking for a mom, because that's, without a mother, how does the child survive, right? But it's the emotional context that gives the depth and flavor to our experiences. And I think at times we don't pay enough attention to the emotional context, what's driving the emotional reaction. And I learned this way back, because I grew up on a working dairy farm. And there were times where, okay, we need to go get hay. We need to go get alfalfa hay for the cows. Okay, great. And you can be out there and picking up bales of hay and trying to get them loaded on a flatbed truck. And it can either suck, or it, on the emotional level, because it's hard physical work. Or it could be just something that you got to do. And so then you can kind of separate, then you can start laughing, joking, messing around with the people that are there helping you load hay on the truck. And that changes the emotional context,
I was gonna ask you, has the meaning that you the emotional context or the meaning that you attach to being adopted, has that changed over time?
On balance, yes, it has. Because it's, I did the DNA testing, trying to find genetically related individuals, that kind of stuff. And then just kind of getting a big overview of people, places, situations, that kind of stuff. And then kind of seeing the whole, start trying to look at the emotional context. Because one thing that I've learned as an adoptee is the emotional context in which you place things will drive whether your basic assumption about an event is good or is not good, and for me, with doing the DNA testing and all that, and actually doing the deep dive, plus actual in-person experience with members of my birth mother's family, I can see why, in a bigger scale, some of the reasoning behind the universe's thing about, like, no, let's adopt this kid out. Let's have things situated to where he's at least got a chance. because I've gotten into, again, with the genetic, with ancestry and all that, and just accessing records and whatnot. I've concluded that the universe has had a reason for me to not grow up in that, in the environment that would have been in place if I would have been with my birth mother. Very dysfunctional. I mean,
yeah.
I'm not saying that I'm the best out there by any means. I know I'm screwy and but yeah, there were there was addictions, and not just addictions that would say like to nicotine, yeah, long term that's going to definitely be detrimental, but that that'll keep in a whole family dynamic. It's like, no big deal. But when you get into, hardcore substance abuse, alcoholism, that kind of stuff, that can be very detrimental.
Yeah. Have you heard this quote from Einstein? Something like the biggest question the biggest question we'll ever ask ourselves is the universe for us, for me, for you, or is it against us? Have you heard that?
I haven't heard that quote, but I can understand where he was coming from. I can.
That's what you said to me before we hit record, and you've alluded to it just now again, that that the universe was placed you for adoption to place you out of a certain harm's way, really.
Yeah,
alluded
I
to.
can believe that. I can believe that. I mean, I don't know about you personally, but I myself have had situations to where miraculous things have happened. Certain events, certain people, certain places, and a lot of it, I think we kind of throw off as, oh, that's just coincidence. But when you stop to think about how many separate actions had to happen in a particular sequence for the event in question to actually come about, okay.
Yeah. There's a sense that I heard this expressed really well a couple of weeks ago. This stuff doesn't happen to us, it happens for us.
Yeah, I can. Well, I think that would depend on how you take it, right? Because humans assign emotional meaning to events, to situations. That's how we're built. And so we can either look at things as the universe, quote unquote, is working for us, or the universe is working against us.
Yeah.
Then if you drop into quantum theory, this is where it gets really spooky. Your expectation actually affects the quantum level of what we know as reality right now. So if our expectation is changing the quantum level. Who's to say that that doesn't keep, the whole domino idea, and it gets passed through all the way up to observable, what we observe, what we feel, and all that. One of my favorite quotes is that we are spiritual beings having a physical experience. And we're just here trying to, we're just here trying to figure it out as we go. But yeah, it's, it also, I think, comes down to the whole idea of, do you see the universe as a friendly place? Trying to work with you, trying to provide you with what you need? Or is the universe cold, sterile, just mechanical, or, and so your outlook, I believe, will affect what you get back, because it's been proven that thought can change physical reality. Have you ever watched the series, What the Bleep Do We Know?
Yeah.
Okay. If you get the quantum edition, it will really, it's like, okay. So it's just been a thing of how do you, for me personally, how do I move from seeing things as negative, seeing events, people, all that stuff in a negative manner, to actually seeing things as an attempt by forces unknown to provide me with people, places, events, and everything for my continued well-being.
So how do you stack that up with the emotional heartache stuff that you've talked about?
Well, okay, speaking of emotions are, in my opinion, they're kind of a very, very generalized navigation system, so kind of like the lodestones from way back, where you have something that would float and a lodestone on it, and you just kind of basically, it would always point north and you were using that for navigation. I've come to the belief that our emotions not only tell us, okay, there is a deficit of some kind going on inside, but also that events and situations can happen. We have an emotional response that a lot of times we don't even question. It just, oh, my emotions are there. Okay. Well, just be based off of my own experience. A lot of the emotional context gets placed on events after the event has happened. So it's retroactive. It's not the emotions that were present at the moment. So, and our emotional context gets filtered through a bunch of crap. Let's get real. um, prior experiences, prior emotional context that we attach to certain memories. So it's our emotions, I believe, are kind of a very, very, very bad, very loose directional system to drive us to things that we should be, I'll put it that way, should be beneficial. Because cognitively, I mean, you got to stop and think about this. Your cerebellum only can process about 1,000 bits of information a second, where the rest of your brain is working at about 1,000 times more data throughput. So our attention is like a spotlight. But everything else is going on underneath is like 360-degree radar that's going on all the time. And most of the time, our attention is on this spotlight. And then events happen, we assign an emotional context to them, and then that's how stuff gets encoded into memory. Well, I've gone through several series of being hypnotized. And yeah, you want to talk about something brave, to actually let somebody go in there and rummage around inside your own head. But so an event that happened, and then that memory gets encoded, and then the emotional context also gets encoded along with that memory. But once you can take the juice, so for lack of a better term, the emotional intensity out of that memory, then it just becomes another memory. It's kind of like taking high definition color photograph, and then you can, by changing the emotional context, through introspection, through just sitting with the emotions, because our emotions are a type of guidance. Okay. However, this guidance system was formed during a time in our lives where most folks were not really aware of them, not or aware of the way that, emotions work. And so by revisiting, highly charged emotional events and being able to reframe into a different viewpoint. Because who's to say that how you remember something is actually reality? Yeah. So by going back in, doing some reframing and some other stuff, then it takes the emotional charge out of it. And you take the emotional charge out of it, a lot of times that allows healing, and like my experience, where I'm at now, what I know now, compliments of, genetic testing, I am thankful that I did not, is there the genetic desire to know people that share my genetic code? Oh, hell yeah, definitely. But at the same time, if I had been raised in the environment afforded by those people, you and I would not be having this conversation right now. Point blank. Because I know myself well enough that if I'd been raised in that environment, I would either be dead or I would be addicted to whatever substance is out there. Or I would be firmly incarcerated within the prison system. Now, it may sound like I have, excluded a lot of the other opportunity, other possibilities. However, I was in contact with my, my birth mother's family, and even then, and I'd been in contact with them for several years, and it got even as screwed up as I was. I mean, I was fighting a alcohol addiction at the time with a small child and being divorced. That there was this like, yeah, I'm screwed up. I admit I was at the time, I was not good, but they were worse. So,
Yeah.
And I'm not talking worse as in people. I'm not talking worse than that kind of stuff, but just their approach to living their life, you know. It's like personally, any substance, and there are a lot of them, not to mention, meditation techniques and stuff like that you can alter reality, no problem. But when altering reality through substances or whatever starts becoming a detriment to living your life, no, sorry, I can't do that. And so I can see how events played out now. I'm not going to lie. It's been a long, hard road for me to get to where I'm at right now. It has been hell. But I can see now how things have played out for my highest and best good. And so that tells me that there is going to go a little spiritual on you, that I actually have a purpose here, whether it's just actually asking the checkout person how they are and actually meaning it, but there's a purpose here for me to do in this realm. And if I had been raised differently, if I had not gone through the pain, the loss, the soul shredding events that I've been through, I wouldn't be the person I am today. I'd be I'd be one of those guys that would be, you know, so and so was arrested for,
Yeah.
you know, um, because I do have that, I do have that tendency. I'll sink my teeth into something, whether it's for good or ill, and not let go until some kind of result shows up. And it's taken me a few decades, but I think I've finally got that under control to a point where now I can sink my teeth into something, and generally speaking, it's all for good.
Yeah.
You know, to be uplifting, to be helpful. Because that's one of the things I've learned too in my path is, you know, we're here to help each other. We're not here, and I'm not just talking financial, because the Lord knows lots of people like to take advantage of that. But the kind word, the small considerations, you know, whether it's male or female. It's like, as an example, I was at the post office the other day, and a gentleman coming in carrying a lot of packages. I held the door for him. Just, you know, small act of courtesy. And his reaction was such that you would have swore I just handed him, you know, $100 bill. It made his day, you know? And so, you know, it's like where I'm at now, I'm not gonna lie. There's still tender areas. I'm not gonna lie. There are certain things that still, you know, are tender, for lack of a better term. But I can kind of see the longer term pattern. And after a lot of work on my part, I've actually got to a point where I like myself. You know, I love myself. I can be kind and considerate to myself. Where as an adoptee, you know, that at times can be hard won, you know, to feel like you matter, to feel, I mean, because you think about the thought process of a small child, you know, they're not, I mean, it's basically just pure emotion, right? And so, but now I can actually look back and go, if I had not been put up for adoption, chances are, with probability, my own innate being, chances are you and I would not be sitting here having this conversation at this time. And that's not to say that, you know, I haven't been through my fair share of crap, you know, I have, but I'm finally at a point where I can see some of the reasoning, you know. I have to believe that there's a higher intelligence there. I have to, because there have been events, situations in my life that have worked out to where there was no way, there was nothing that I could have done. There was nothing I could have said. There was no action that I could have taken to have the situation work out the way it did. Not to say that some of these situations, some of them were painful, hella painful. But at the same time, I can see some of the why behind going through the events that I've gone through, which leads me back to a greater intelligence than I has got something in. There's a plan there. And if that plan is just me being a good dude, right? And being able to go to the checkout person and legitimately, not just polite conversation, but actually mean, how are you? Are you doing okay? To actually show that that little bit of kindness, consideration to another human, which you never know. That could have been, that one little thing could have prevented them from doing something stupid. Maybe that one little thing, that small moment of kindness and consideration, maybe that's the domino that gets flicked to have them, go into their best life. How do I know? I don't.
Wow.
And that's not to say that, yes, there are times that I do get stern. I'll use that term. But usually I become stern after another human has expressed themselves in such a way where it's like, whoa, wait a minute, what? Nah, I didn't do anything to you, man. I mean, come on. Check yourself, dude. So overall, I'm all right. I'm not going to say that I'm where I need to be, because there's higher intelligence out there that's kind of orchestrating all this stuff. But I can say that even right now in my life, even after dissolution of marriage and all that stuff, I'm pretty all right.
Yeah.
I find enjoyment. And the quote unquote coincidences that come in while I'm enjoying my life now, just amazing, just absolutely amazing. But then again, I look for them. I look for the kindness. I look for, coincidences. I look for how, even though you just got to do your best at the time, how things, if you're willing, will work out for your best good. Kind of like this. It's like, I'm not gonna lie, I was nervous, some trepidation, but then it's like, well, if me working my jaw, speaking to another kind human, and that gets out to somebody and they can actually get solace, they can get some help, maybe something I said or the way I phrase something sparks something, and then they can see something in a different light, which adds to their, adds to
sorry, listeners, we've lost. Kelly's completely frozen. Thank you for listening. I don't think it's going to come back. Thanks for listening. Some great stuff there from Kelly, and we'll speak to you again very soon.